So Eddie, we just had a rather spirited conversation as we get ready to continue our Barbara Walters style interview of the great Eddie Reece. We've
Yeah.
learned a little bit about Eddie in his formative years, his childhood in and around Atlanta, his foray into radio, and of course where he was educated and found his way to the other side of the therapist's couch. We also got to learn about Eddie's just reverence for civil rights and the civil rights movement and the leaders of that movement. That if you grew up or were teenagers in the time that we referenced from the 70s through the 90s, where none of us were teenagers, but except for me. But you got to meet guys like John Lewis and perhaps Ambassador Young. And, when Jimmy Carter left office, he certainly kept busy here in the great state of Georgia. We're really fortunate to have been able to witness and then for me, being able to hear the stories of that time. And if you had the chance to listen to our previous episode, then you know just the impact and gravity of being around that movement at that time. And not to put words in Eddie's mouth, but to be blessed with the opportunity to actually communicate one-to-one with the gentlemen and women that executed that initiative was truly impactful on one Eddie Reece. So we left our last episode where Eddie was just amazingly impacted by the graciousness of one John Lewis, and now he is, I believe we were mid-90s. So we're going to pick up kind of from the mid-90s to today as we record this episode. We're sitting on May 30th in 2024. So we're kind of going to look at the last 30 years. We've already kind of been able to see the first 30 years of Eddie's life and work. And I think you probably got a better understanding of the makeup of the man. And now it's time to see how that man moved into his professional life and how it influenced, how he worked with his patients and how he viewed psychotherapy and his impact on it and the legacy he hopes to have as a result of it. So with that, Eddie, it's awesome to see you again, my friend.
Thanks, Billy. It's good to be seen. You know,
Yes, that's
that
right.
means you're
That's right.
still around.
That's right. Rather be seen than viewed. Okay. So Eddie, bringing you back to where we were to the best of my ability, setting the stage a little bit because it's been a week since we last spoke. But you were talking about Mr. Lewis and you and your lovely bride in his office in Washington, and both here in Atlanta as well as Washington. And just kind of with that, kind of recall a little bit about what it was like to be in the congressional office and how you were treated, and then we'll just start our episode from there.
Yeah, I mean, trying to figure where to go because I like your idea of tying this into me becoming a therapist. That story is like most of the stories of parts of times in my life. It's very disjointed, scattered all over the place. I talked some, and I have no idea what I really said, but I talked some about winding up in undergraduate school, just to be in radio, and I've finished my undergraduate degree in mental health, and thought at that time I would be a therapist, but that's how naive I was, and maybe some too a reflection on the program. I didn't understand that I had to have a graduate degree, and for whatever reason, I was like, I just finished for almost 5 years. It was a long program in school, and I don't know that I want to go another 2 years. And so I didn't apply for graduate school, and I wound up wandering the desert for 12 years uh, before I actually wound up in graduate school. If I ever put together a resume, or something, I mean, it would just be thick and tons of things. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out some career in that 12-year span. Me and this other guy decided we would have a limousine company that didn't last too long, and I wound up joining the Air Force, which is as contrary to everything I had ever been up to that moment. In terms of what are you going to do now? I mean, nobody, including myself, would have come up with that option. But I had in my mind and that for some reason I didn't think I had the time and or money to go to graduate school. And this is a great story about not living in reality because thinking that I didn't know how much time or money it took. So for me to decide I didn't have the time and money was just insane because you don't even know how much it takes, and I actually would have had plenty of time and money. I was making really good money in the grocery store. I still was working in a grocery store. I bought a house, in my early 20s. So I had plenty of money to go to graduate school. Um, and you could do it. I was working full time, but it wasn't 40 hours a week. Um, so I don't know what made me think I didn't have the time and money. So I got, and I talked about this too a bit. It just boom. I'll look at the military. The military would pay for my schooling. And then I'd have a regular job, and I'm really tired of the grocery business. And so let me go look. It's just how in the world that thought got there, and then I followed through, and I have this snapshot memory of after I had talked to each branch of the service and decided I was going to go Air Force. I remember reaching for the doorknob there at the recruiting station to go in and sign the papers, and there was this moment like, "What are you doing?" And I went on in. So I went to officer training school, became an officer in the Air Force. Complete culture shock. I was just like, whoa. I mean, I was used to my own hours, working when I wanted to, I was kind of my own boss in the grocery store. And I was not a morning person. I don't think I've ever got up much earlier than maybe 9 o'clock, and now I'm getting up at 3:30 in the morning, and marching around the base at San Antonio Air Force, and at their base there, and learning to be an Air Force officer. And so it's quite the experience, to say the least. And realize this is not what I wanted to do for a career. At the same time, I have this real, wow, just soft spot. It's the only description I can come up with. I have this real soft spot for the military. Growing up, when I grew up, World War II was not very far away. And so, I grew up with all the TV shows and movies and stuff about that. And I I really got into that, but I developed as I got older, I developed this real soft spot for the military in that what anybody would go through to go into a war, especially, and to the sacrifices and all of that, and I can very easily get choked up, talking about those experiences and the trip I made to Normandy and standing on Omaha Beach and just picturing it. I mean, it's very touching. So there is something about the military that somehow, I guess, led me there, but I knew it wasn't going to be a career. And when I got out, I've wandered around again and trying to figure out what I was going to do, and wound up being a bartender,
Kind of a
which is
therapist.
kind of a therapist. Yeah. And the story I tell people about being a bartender, the very first day I'm running the bar by myself after I was trained, the very first person that walks in to sit at the bar at 11 o'clock in the morning in a Ruby Tuesday. He sat down at the bar at 11 o'clock and ordered a drink. He starts talking to me. He's the only one there. And within minutes, it seemed like, in my memory, he was telling me some story and crying. And I'm like, whoa, this is really what it's like. It's like, like this is something else. And I had a great time being a bartender. I'm an introvert that gets extroverted, and being a bartender, I realized one night is I'm at the party, but I've got this really great position in the party, and I'm separated from it by this bar, and I'm in charge of people's alcohol. So, you know, and so it's a different way to experience a party because I'm not the kind of person with my introversion to be part of the party.
Mm.
And I did
You were the
that for a
conductor, not the
while.
orchestra.
Yeah, exactly. And always separated somehow from whatever I'm doing. I'm that person that if I go into a group kind of meeting or something, I'm going to sit off to the side or to the back, or somehow I'm not going to generally wind up right down front and participating in anything. That may be my Southern Baptist church. We sat at the back of the church. So we wanted to be the first ones out the door. So I wandered around some more, and I actually just kind of never quite could make enough money or get a regular kind of job, and wound up moving into this condo that a buddy of mine who had been a roommate, he lived upstairs and I had lived with him upstairs. He said, "Hey, the condo downstairs is open and I think it's pretty cheap." And I wound up moving in there really down. Um, I was 35 years old at that point. Still hadn't figured out what to do with my life. So you folks that are listening to this that are younger than 35, there's a chance, you you you're just a slow learner,
Mm.
like I was. And I felt awful one night and wound up going to Northside Mental Health to talk to a counselor. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know. I didn't think I was suicidal, but I knew I didn't. I wasn't really happy. And that's kind of when I got going in therapy. He just said, "Hey, you're just trying to figure some things out. Let me get you started in individual therapy." And so I started going to therapy and got a job in a psych hospital that was Bronner Psych Hospital that no longer exists out in Smyrna, Georgia. And that's kind of how things got going. And I applied to graduate school, and it's really interesting because if you go back to before I joined the Air Force, I'm thinking I don't have the time or money to go to graduate school. And I actually did. At the moment I went back to graduate school, I really didn't have the money. I mean, I was broke. I had plenty of time because was working odd jobs. And a story about the power of conviction and you being that motivational kind of guy, you'll like this. I knew I was going to do it. And so I applied. I didn't have the money. I got accepted. I get the material, okay, register for classes on this day. I went and registered. Then I get the bill, you know, I don't have any money. And I borrowed money from a girlfriend. And then I go to school, and one of the things that always kept me from wanting to go to graduate school was I never thought I could write a term paper. Somehow I got through undergraduate school and never wrote a term paper. And it just seemed like this horribly daunting task, it's like, I don't know how to do it. I don't want to do it. I know they're going to make me. And turns out that in the first, we went quarterly. In the first quarter, you had to take the class on how to write a term paper. All right. So I'm like, oh boy. And I'm in that class and I'm kind of getting through it. And one day, fairly early on, the professor comes over to me and says, "Hey, I want to talk to you." And I said, "Yeah, what?" And she goes, "Would you like to be my teaching assistant next quarter?"
Hmm.
I had no idea what a teaching assistant was. I didn't know what they did. And I went, sure, you know. And she says, okay, great. Go talk to this person and they'll get you all set up. I'm like, okay. You know, I don't even know what it is. I didn't ask anybody. I didn't want to, show my ignorance. And so I go and I talk to this person. Oh, yes, Professor so-and-so sent me down. Oh, yeah, have a seat, blah, blah, blah. Fill this out. Okay, you'll be her teaching assistant next semester. And so your tuition is going to get paid, so you don't have to worry about that. It's like,
That's a bonus.
really? Oh yeah. And so it paid my tuition. I'm like, oh my gosh, all I got to do is buy the book. I mean, and this is back in the old days. So, I mean, none of this stuff costs that much. So I wound up being a teaching assistant every semester for somebody. And then my tuition was paid. And so the moral of the story is if you commit to something, you don't have to know how it's going to happen.
I thought the moral was if you're a mid-30s grad student, you'll guaranteed a TA position.
Yeah. Well, actually, in the program I was in, being in my mid-30s just made me one of the gang. I mean, it was an awful lot of people, either first careers or second careers, so most that there were almost I don't really remember anybody in their 20s in that program. Yeah. So, yeah, now it's just, like they say, a way will be shown to you. it'll get figured out. You just commit, keep going, take the next step, take the next step, take the next step. You'll figure it out. So I got through graduate school and became a therapist, and here I am, some 30 something years later. I work at home. Where what you see in the background here is a bookcase in my office that's in my home. The front door is right there, so you come in and you come into my office, and it all turned into this. And the journey to being a therapist really is the journey about being in therapy. I was in therapy at least once a week, a lot of times more than that when I was doing a group, individual, sometimes couples. So a lot of therapy and some 20, I don't know, I'd have to sit down and go through my journals to look it up, but 24, 5, 6 years continuously without a break. Um,
Same
and then
therapist?
no, different therapist. And then I got to where I would finally take a break, and then I would go back and take a break, go back. And that's kind of where it is now.
So how would you say being in therapy influenced or shaped how you perform therapy?
You get intimately familiar with the neighborhood
What do you mean by that?
that as a client, you come in and you're in this neighborhood that you thought you knew, but you don't. Things don't work the way that it seems like it's supposed to work. And having been through as much therapy as I've been through, I learned how it all works. And so I'm a tour guide, you know. I'm like, let me show you what you don't see because I've seen it. And it's how I came to be so adamant's not even a strong enough word. Zealot, zealous, hard line that do not, under any circumstances or any reason, go see a therapist who has not had their own therapy. It will be a complete waste of your time and money. And if you're a therapist listening to this and you haven't been in your own therapy and that offends you, good. I hope it makes you mad. And I hope you actually go talk to somebody about it and go, you know what, this crazy guy said about it, you know, and then have somebody tell you, well, he's right. Go to therapy. I mean, why to go see anybody in the service industry, and this is a service, who doesn't believe in their service enough to use it? I mean, that makes no sense to me. So going through the process of completely and it really does feel in the moment that time like just ripping yourself apart, you know, and looking at everything. I mean, everything, and realizing that whatever I thought about myself made no sense. It wasn't right. What I thought about the world wasn't right. What I thought about other people wasn't right. I pretty much had everything wrong. And if you don't understand what you're dealing with, you can't do anything with it that would ever work, you know? So you have to in order to live moderately well, right? To accomplish anything in a way that is really satisfying, really feeds you. Okay. So I'm not talking about you go win a Nobel Prize or, wind up with a nice house and family and car and mortgage, whatever you want to accomplish in your life, write a great novel or whatever. For that to truly be satisfying in a way to where you weren't doing it to be enough or to have other people believe you're enough or to make yourself feel better in any way. You do it because that's what you do.
It's
I don't I don't sit with clients because there's some emptiness in me I'm trying to fill, you know? You can look at what so many of us do in our lives, just trying to fill those voids in our lives and fill them up somehow to where they won't be empty anymore, which was never going to work. We have an episode about the hungry ghosts, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. You can't satisfy a hungry ghost. So you go through this process as a client and you really learn this stuff. There's a saying that those who know and don't do don't know. So you wind up really knowing it. I know the territory. I know how it works. Clients can say the smallest things to me and it shows me this big giant picture of something because I've said the same thing. I've experienced the same thing they've experienced. I've been there, done that, know what it looks like, and so I can guide them through it and show them what was shown to me and help them learn the things that I learned, and then they don't do this anymore. They do this. It's tricky to explain.
It makes perfect sense, though. I mean, it genuinely does. I mean, the fact that you have a firsthand understanding of what's going on in your head and, more importantly, your heart as a result of either the feelings, the questions, the conversations, the memories, the re-experiencing of some of these difficult and likely traumatic at times events, just
Mhm.
to be able just to sit there and watch someone maneuver that without any firsthand understanding, uh, kinda seems callous in my opinion, and
Yeah,
I don't know how anybody could do that well.
I think you have to be incredibly narcissistic in a way that you can help people with it, but you don't need any help. So yeah, you go through this process because I mean it saved my life in a sense that it gave me a life. I really floundered for those first 35 years. I did all kinds of things. I had all kinds of adventures. I had a lot of good times. But there was this, I'm thinking of John Irving's book when he describes the undertow. I think that was in Garp. The undertow is always there. And that's where the dog sorrow wound up. That there was always this current of like, it's not enough. It's that's not what I really want. Why can't I accomplish this? Why does this relationship with somebody not working out? Why do I treat people this way, treat myself this way? Why are they treating me? I thought I could answer all that, but I really couldn't until in therapy, I realized that it had really virtually nothing to do with anything out there. It's all me, you know. I'm making myself miserable. Nobody else is, and it's not even because, I had these experiences as a childhood. That's not why I'm miserable. It's how I'm responding to those and what I believe about those and what I think about that and what I want to do about that. And that's what makes me miserable. It's not the experience that I had. And it sounds odd, and I say it to my clients, but you learn to grow up. You learn, which is the process of learning so much about how life actually happens and works, and your choices about what to do, and that you have choices, you know? You can do whatever you want. You're grown up. You can, run through the living room with scissors now if you want to. You can stare into the refrigerator as long as you want, you know? You can do whatever you want. There's nothing making you do anything. And so you grow up and learn to be in charge, and that this is how I can make changes. And I don't know of any other place where you can really learn that other than a therapist's couch. And there's been a lot of things that have happened to me that weren't therapy that did greatly impact me, but they really only helped me learn things that made me a better person or a more functional person because I had knowledge that I gained in therapy and I could apply to it. So everything in my life stems from those experiences as a client, and everything I share with a client. And in a way, everything that I'm sharing right now, and with anybody, and everything that goes on inside of me is attached to those experiences as a client in therapy.
Yeah, it sounds like what I'm hearing you say, is the majority of people who need therapy probably aren't in it.
The
And
which is not the majority of people, it's everybody.
right, that's my
Uh,
point. It's not
yeah,
it has nothing to you have made a comment in the past which always it struck me immediately, and I think about it all the time, which is that, the stigma that there's something wrong with you if you're considering therapy or, "What's wrong with me? I need a therapist," or
mhm,
something's wrong, when the
right.
essence is, you're normal.
You're just
And the fact
normal,
that
you're
you're
like
here
everybody
is
else, yeah.
well, but the fact that they're in front of you or any therapist is courageous and noble and will be rewarded in a way that makes them even more abnormal, which is to say that
Mhm,
they're adjusted, coping, dealing,
right.
reconciling, accepting, and truly living the entire human experience, as you like to put it.
Yeah, that you gosh, I have so many different ways I put it, you learn to not believe in the cultural crap that we're taught to believe in, and you live m more organically, meaning out of here, who am I? And you actually know who you are, and if you know who you are, you also know what you want. You can't because you can't know what you want if you don't know who you are, and you know what you don't want, and you also know that you don't know. And you're not as black and white about everything. You're like, there's a John Barth book. John died recently, called The End of the Road. There's a character in there, Jacob Horner, and Jacob Horner was asked, "What do you think?" And he goes, "I have all opinions." Yeah. And I remember really being struck by that when I read it as a young man, that you realize there's a lot you really don't know, so don't act like you do, you know,
Yeah.
and quit running around talking like you do, and
Well, there's an episode. Jeez.
yeah,
Well,
yeah, and
I
listen, just listen to people,
yeah. I love
listen.
the saying, you know, it's not what we know that hurts us, and it's not even what we don't know that's harmful. It's what we absolutely know that just isn't true.
No, absolutely, yeah, and as and that as a client, what you go through is learning that these things that you know are true just aren't, you know, and that you were fooled, you were sold a bill of goods, you were brainwashed, you were really, the way I've come to talk about it is you were trained. Your nervous system, which is who you are in terms of making change, your nervous system was trained to respond this way, to believe this, to have this thought, to produce this behavior. And you didn't question it, no more than a dog questions rolling over when you offer it a treat. It doesn't go, should I roll over? Should I not roll over? Do I have a choice? And you just roll over, stimulus response. And that most of us are actually living our lives that way. We think we can plan it all out and think about it and make logical, rational decisions about it. And some things you can, but most of it, nah. It's just that, and then you make up a story that explains that, you know. And that's the opposite of living organically. That's living from out here in. I want to help people live from in here out. So, I don't know of any other way to do it, God.
Eddie,
Uh,
would you say that you have a brand of therapy?
and not really. I do whatever works. That's kind of my answer. It's all improv. It's all made up on the spot.
That may be true, but
Um,
one thing I know about you is it may be improvisational in that you don't know where you're going or how you'll end up, but you do behave in a manner that's within your integrity and securely
yeah,
founded upon your values.
yeah. I mean, like a great musician when you're just jamming. I mean, I've learned the licks. I know the scales. I know the different chords to play. I've learned when to join in and when to play background. And so I know that. And so when I'm with a client, that's what I'm doing. It's I don't pair for the session, and I take a look at what we talked about last time, and I go in there and I start, actually I let them start, I go, what can I do for you today? Or, and let them go. And then I'm playing off of that. So now there's not a brand. I mean, there's the licks, the things that I've learned, so to speak, come from uh, existentialism. They come from Buddhism. They come from psychodynamics, theory. They come from Jungian theory. There's a little bit of Freudian stuff in there. There's plenty of behavioral kinds of things in there. There's a lot of neurological, biological kind of uh, physiological science in there because I love the human body and how it all. I mean, so there's all these different genres of music I learned to play. You know, so when we're jamming, I can pull from any part of that and toss it in there.
As you contemplate the end of your career and summing up, kind of drawing a close to the hopefully worthwhile career that was therapy and being a therapist, what do you want to be known for?
I got stuck on the end of my career. I think the end of my career is when I'm either dead or I don't know who I am anymore. Some sort of Alzheimer's or something that would end it. I practice what I preach. I don't have any idea what's coming up, career wise. I don't know where this podcast might take me. I don't. I have no idea if I'll keep seeing clients. I can't imagine not. But maybe I'll write something. I don't know.
Well, okay, let me
yeah.
reframe that. If you made the decision that you're moving into the next chapter, whatever that may be, what do you want to be known for?
If you kind of blow the thing up to where moderately known in the business, which I'm not at all. Probably, as a guy who somehow help people see that it's not as complicated as they thought it was. And I go back to an interview with Sean Fogarty, who was the founder of Creedence Clearwater Revival for you old people out there. This is a rock and roll band. And John,
put me in, coach.
Yeah, put me in, coach. John did a solo album, and Terry Gross on Fresh Air, it's where I heard this, was interviewing him about the album, and she says, all the songs you ever wrote were metaphorical until this album. And you're writing in a very straightforward manner in this album. How did that come about? And he goes, it took me 30 years to learn how to write simple. That's what I'd want to be known for, Somehow Eddie makes it's real simple to where therapy's not this big scary thing, It's not this real complicated thing, really. Though, if you listen to great musicians sit and jam, you're like, God, the world. They pull that off, I mean, but, how does anybody, do what they do well? How does an athlete do it to do well? A writer, a father or mother, you practice it, you go at it, you do a deep dive, and that deep dive in this business is the time I spend in therapy and the time I spend every day, all day long. I mean, it really is every day, all day long of paying attention to this thing that I am, and watching it and interacting with it and exploring it and tinkering with it. So I'd want to be known as the guy that somehow, not only just sort of made it seem simpler or easier, but then that leading to excuse me, more people giving it a shot. You know,
Yeah.
oh gosh, I would love to be known as the guy that folks heard about and then they wanted to go to therapy. That would do it for me, you know. If people said, "Hey, I saw your podcast. I read something you wrote, or I heard you speak, or I know somebody who was a client." However, they became familiar with me, and they said, "Because you aren't there."
Eddie
Yeah,
Reece, the man that destigmatized
mm,
psychotherapy for the world. That
yeah,
would be amazing. No, I,
yeah,
I
yeah.
apologize if
That
I
would be
challenged
it.
your with that
No, that was a
question.
great question. I never, I hadn't really thought about it. I don't think really in those terms.
I know you don't, and that's why I asked, because the idea of beginning with the end in mind is
Yeah,
not that level of intentionality brings with it a whole bunch of challenges that we talk about,
yeah,
because it's right with judgment and all kinds of things. Because if you're not on track, off track, or capable, incapable, succeeding, failing, it's why we beat ourselves up. But the reality is, you know, you struggling with that, in my opinion, is exactly why you are so awesome,
mm,
because you live your life so focused on others that when asked to think about how someone might talk about you, you weren't exactly sure where to go.
Well, I would reframe it, Billy. It's not that I live my life so focused on others. I really am 1,000,000% focused on me and how am I living, breathing, responding, interacting, and am I doing that with as much thoughtfulness and kindness and caring within myself and with others. So the focus is really on me so that if I'm with another, then I'm going to interact with them in a way that is helpful in some way. I get such a big kick out of talking to strangers, and especially if they'll let me kind of venture into their mind a bit, and to get a comment like, "Wow, never thought about it that way before," and I can see a light bulb go on. I mean that makes my day. It just to help people see this thing that they are just a little bit clearer, and that's fun. That's my idea of a good time. I end a lot of sessions, especially if it's a really, emotionally charged one for a client, you know, thanking them for coming today and I go and allowing me to do what I consider having a really good time. This is fun for me.
Yeah. Oh man, ladies
It's
and gentlemen.
life in tears.
Yeah, well, of
This is
course,
fun for me.
Yeah, yeah, no question. We could go into the breakthrough later, but I tell you something, pal. If you listen to just the last two episodes, if you watch the last two episodes on YouTube, however you consume this, when you consume it, I, for one, just feel like I know so much more about the life and career of you, Eddie. And I, on behalf of the listener body and viewer body, I want to just say thank you for providing us with the entertainment and the enlightenment. And I'm reminded as a marketer that no one cares what you know until they know that you care.
Yeah, yeah,
And to the degree you successfully show caring, kindness, and empathy, which we talk about often, you put people into a place where they feel safe. And it's that
yeah,
safety that allows some of the most frightening aspects of them internally to come forward, which I'm not a therapist and I don't want to presuppose I know, but I would imagine that in illuminating those frightening emotions and experiences and memories, bringing them forward in the safe space that is Eddie's office, I can only imagine how exhilarating, enlightening, and truly lightening that can be for some. And, we made an agreement when we first started doing this that if we were going to be friends, I wasn't going to be a client. That's not to say that I don't receive therapy, but, the more I understand you and your process, the more I'm not trading in our friendship, but the more I always wonder like what it would be like to deal with some of the things that have challenged me throughout my life, with you kind of captaining the ship to recovery, or at least safety or safe harbor. So
Yeah,
I,
well, it's easy. It's easy to find out. I mean, just find a therapist that's had
yeah, that's
20,
right.
30 years of therapy and go sit with them. I'm sure it'll look different than it would look if you were watching a video of me at work, but it's going to be the same process.
Yeah.
I really believe that, because there's a school of therapy that says therapy is about the person as therapist. You develop that, you develop yourself, uh, and that's how you do therapy. Um, and I took to that fairly early on after I gave up all the other things I thought, I would study in terms of psychology and therapy and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm not the only guy that does it this way.
No, no, but you're the only Eddie Reece. And ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Eddie, this is Billy Courtright, and I just want to let you know it's been an absolute pleasure, and we would like to express sincere gratitude for you sharing space with us. Again, please, if you're finding this content valuable, share with a friend. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to leave us a question in the comments, we'll be sure to bring it up on a future episode. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of Couch Trip Therapy for Everyday Life. And Eddie and I are going to keep it on because this is fun. This is fun for us,
It
and hopefully
is.
it's enlightening for you. So once again, we will talk to you guys soon. Looks like next episode next week. We'll see you there.
Bye, folks.